Thank you. All right, so for our final session today, we have a vendor presentation. Please welcome Clayton Barlow, Senior Cloud Solutions Architect at Microsoft, who's here to talk to us about the state of research within Azure today.
Thanks, Naomi. Thanks, everyone, for joining. I see a few familiar and friendly names on the call, so excited to get a chance to speak with you all today, and appreciate the opportunity to do so. So let me bring up my presentation real quick here. Awesome. Here we go. Let me know when you can all see my screen okay.
Got it.
Got it.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, before we get too started, at least so you get an idea of who I am, why you may want to listen to what I have to say, or maybe why you don't. But anyways, my name's Clayton Barlow. I'm a cloud solution architect for Microsoft. By way of experience, where I come from, I've spent the last, prior to joining the Microsoft team, I was filling the enterprise architecture roles for about 6.5 years as the chief architect for the University of Utah and U of U Health Systems, running the enterprise architecture department there, and then CHG Healthcare as well. Have a bachelor's in computer science and a master's in data analytics. And honestly, I've been around IT since before IT was cool. That ages me a little bit, but that's okay. I think a lot of us have been around for a long time. Outside of that, I'm kind of obsessed with coffee, love to mountain bike, love to be outdoors. So if you have any of those questions on top of cloud, I'm happy to talk your ear off about those as well. So let's talk about why cloud. What's the drive for cloud within research institutions, and what is it that's making them start to take a harder look at cloud and be more focused on it? Well, frankly, there's a lot of flexibility that goes into it. And that's, I think, what most institutions, at least the ones I work with regularly, that flexibility is what's creating that gain of ground into cloud. And so, when we think about intelligent analytics, or maybe huge scale or something to that nature, or maybe it's the compliance cycles that they're having to deal with. And we're going to get into each one of these a little bit more deeply. And I think the other thing that is worth noting, when you move to the cloud, it's slightly a different approach than what we're used to specifically in higher ed. So in higher ed, we're kind of used to hey, you bring your data to us, and us being the high performance compute folks. You bring it to us, and we do all the stuff that you need to do. We do your computational services, and then we hand you your results, and now you're still responsible for, how are you going to back this up long term? Do you have to keep the data? Does it persist? But you're always kind of moving the data around to be able to do what you need to do. Cloud is more of a data-centric approach, where you have your data and you use capabilities. You bring the capabilities into the area where your data is, just so that you can actually be a little bit more effective without doing a lot of the data migration pieces. So that's one aspect about it that I always want to kind of preface every kind of start of a cloud conversation when it comes to especially research, is it is a different approach. And a lot of that has to do with the capabilities. So if I think about, why cloud, flexibility, but if I think about why Azure as a cloud provider, we've got a lot of flexible data management solutions. If you're thinking about SQL servers and being able to use those as SQL instances and still bring your licenses with you and take advantage of the hybrid use benefit for SQL or any of that kind of stuff, or how we do data lakes, or how we can do Azure files, all these different pieces around the data platform. It's very flexible. So instead of saying I have a single solution or a set of solutions, it's a pretty wide-ranging set of capabilities that you're able to bring it in and utilize from a platform perspective. And then we've also got a ton of these built-in AI and machine learning capabilities. This is a huge differentiator for cloud versus on-prem. Is a lot of this stuff that you just don't have on-prem. So that's where you can start thinking about, hey, I know I got the dedicated clusters, I know I've got the big compute on-prem, but I really want to do this thing and I don't know how to do it. Well, Microsoft has you taken care of in Azure with a lot of these capabilities. And that means that you can actually speed up a little bit of time to results because we have these pre-built for you. And then when it comes to high performance computing, and I've got a slide that updates on this one specifically, what if you need more compute than you have available to you? We've got customer stories around Duke, for example, massive amount of compute needed. And they did, I can't even remember the amount of cycles that they did over a weekend, but I know I did the math one time, and it was an average laptop. It would have had to run for a year to get the same amount of compute that they did over a weekend. Not even a full weekend, just a couple of days of a weekend. So that kind of scale in the high performance computing is just not possible on-prem. It's just not possible anywhere. And so that's where Azure comes in, having that ability to scale. And this one, we're definitely going to get really deep on, and that's security and compliance. We have a more comprehensive set of tools when it comes to security and compliance than any other cloud platform out there. The identity that you use already, most of your research institutions, they already have Active Directory. They already have Azure AD. It's part of their Office 365 engagement. They have the identity piece. They've got a lot of the discovery pieces already plumbed up and ready to take advantage of. So it's not even the most comprehensive set of tools, but it's a lot of the tools that you're already using, so you're not having to reinvent the wheel. So what does that mean when you put all this together? Well, you start to actually get a really cool way of plumbing a lot of really forward-thinking solutions together to come up with something and solve problems that you may not be able to solve readily on-prem. So I'm going to jump into a quick customer story, and I'm not going to go too deep, but I'm a little biased to this customer story because I had a blast working with him, and I was the lead architect on this one. But this story is great, and you can go out to the link underneath, and you can actually go read it yourself, the whole write-up on it. But really, they were faced with a problem, and this is where, again, when I see institutions wanting to adopt cloud, it's usually because there's some issue, something needs to be done that they can't currently do. And University of Pittsburgh was a classic example of this. Some researchers there really had a need to collaborate with some outside researchers. And it was very sensitive data. Beyond the fact that it was just HIPAA data, it was very valuable data, and they couldn't have it exfiltrate. They couldn't have anything, but they wanted to use Azure machine learning. They wanted to use a lot of these really advanced set of capabilities. And the researchers came to Central IT. Central IT was kind of like, well, that's not something we do here. Hey, let's reach out to Microsoft. They're great partners, and let's see what we can do. And in a small space of time, just over a month, we created this ultra secure research environment that allowed the external researchers to come in, build their models, do the research, but not actually, ensure that nothing was coming out of that environment besides some trained models, and that was about it. So this is a great customer story because not only was it a one-time thing, but this taught them a whole new set of tricks. It taught them a whole new set of capabilities that they utilize every day now. And so that's been part of the fun is working with institutions to go through the art of possible and recognize that there's just stuff that they don't know and they don't know how to do, and take advantage of it and learn in Azure. And now it's just like I said, it's part of their toolbox. It's what they do. In fact, Brian Pasquini, one of the gentlemen there, loves to talk about Azure Data Factory. It's a simple thing that we brought in that allowed for some secure movement of data. And he'd never seen it, never touched it. They actually had some maturity around Azure, but he'd never seen it, never touched it. We showed him how to use it, and it became a go-to tool for him for ETL and all these other kind of stuff. So that's the fun stuff about the customer story. So this next one is meant to be an eye chart. I'm not going to go into each one of these, right? But what I want you to see specifically around the services for AI and ML that we offer, right? So when I talk about University of Pittsburgh or other customers, really a lot of times what they're trying to do is take advantage of something that they don't have on-prem, or they don't even have an idea of how to use it or how to utilize it. So when you look at all these different things that we offer from our cognitive services perspective, just the different pieces that we have, and we're going to cover some of the updates on these things and kind of get you a better idea of where we are from a maturity perspective, and how much we're constantly doing to improve these. So it's not only enough that we've already got a lot of this stuff, we're constantly improving them, and we're constantly adding to these feature sets and these capabilities. So we'll get into a lot of them, but again, some of the things I really want to highlight that I think are just really changing the way things are done is specifically around Azure machine learning and the things that we're doing there with AutoML, and take people who have never done machine learning before, starting to run some AML, AutoML tasks against it, and kind of opening their world to the concepts of machine learning. And then again, the big data services, because frankly, with this data-centric approach, you have to understand the inherent gravity that comes with data, right? You don't want to be moving it all over the place. And so by taking these services and being able to access the data effectively, especially things like Databricks or Synapse Analytics, if you haven't had a chance to play around with Synapse and all the different things you can do, how you can stitch multiple different data sources together, provide AutoML right inside that. You can have a CSV file, a database. You can have all sorts of stuff and run your notebooks against it like it was all pre-canned into the same data style. It's fantastic services. So again, I'm not going to get in too deep to each one of these, but I just wanted to kind of eye chart you out there. And look, I talk fast. I drink way too much caffeine, so feel free to ask questions. Feel free to pause. I am going to leave some time at the end of the call that we can have some Q&A. You know, I was invited to speak with this through Rob Fotland, who he knows me quite well. He knows that I'll just keep going. So feel free to drop a question in the chat window. I've got one of my peers on this call as well, Rick Friedman, who will pay attention to the questions in the chat window. So we'll make sure we get them answered for you. So what I'm going to move into is updates. What's happened in Azure in the last little bit? You may be familiar with Azure, you may not. Really, you may or may not care about these specific updates, but I chose them specifically to give you an idea of what Microsoft is doing in Azure for research, to kind of give you an idea of how we're moving forward. You know, the things that we're trying to improve upon, the new features that we're bringing out, and just kind of show you the commitment to research that Microsoft has as far as moving forward. So one of the first ones that's been a pretty big deal, and maybe it's just me, I really focus a lot in the secure research area. HIPAA regulated data sets, NIST 800-171, looking towards CMMC level 3, 853. These are kind of this is the world that I live in. And so I think about secure architectures a lot. And I think about how we deal with stuff that doesn't expose data or endpoints out to the world. So we've just gotten to the point where we've got managed endpoints in Azure machine learning, which gives us simplified model development, but it also gives us an inherently more secure environment. But with these managed endpoints, now all of a sudden we can start doing stuff that software engineers have taken advantage of for years, blue-green deployments, you know, updating one model while keeping the existing model and being able to run through it. And improve upon it and not have to tear it down each time, and actually having different compute for each piece of it. So all of a sudden I'm starting to get really flexible on how I can handle, you know, patching of the underlying OS if I'm doing some of that kind of stuff, or node recovery. It's a big deal when you think about if your model is out there and it's deployed, you know, what are some of the things that you can do behind it to maintain recovery in the case of failure. So this is just kind of an update of the latest thing that we've done in Azure machine learning. And it's again, this is to give you an idea of some of the paths we're taking and some of the things we're doing in Azure, specifically around some of our most recent research updates. Another one that we just updated. So we had text analytics services for a while. So this is part of that Azure Cognitive Services where you can, you know, do sentiment mining, you can key phrase extraction, all this kind of stuff. But what we just recently launched is, for general availability was text analytics for health. So this is all part of the text analytics API, but this one is really focused on extracting medical information from unstructured text. So again, if you think about your notes, your charting, all that kind of stuff that you could pull in, now all of a sudden you can mine those notes and other things just for specific healthcare type aspects. Big deal, because instead of having to train a custom text analytics server to do more of what you want, this is of course got those pieces in there as more of a pre-canned solution. And Rick, I know you're monitoring chat, so if a question or a comment comes up that we need to address right out of the gate, feel free to interrupt me, and we'll take care of those.
Yeah, no, so far we're just being heckled with questions like, how can I secure my Windows 98 tower against cyber attacks?
Unplug it.
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. All right, so here's another one, and this is one that just came out. This speaks to that scalability, right? So again, you're going to see that these updates are going to match back to that original slide I showed you about the different capabilities in Azure and the different pieces that you can do. So this one just came out, I want to say a couple months ago that this came out. General availability of scale out the NVIDIA A100 GPU clusters. This is the fastest public cloud supercomputer out there. In fact, it was one of the top 20 fastest supercomputers in the world. And you don't have to go out and wine and dine a bunch of donors to go try and compete with us on this one and stand it up in your own environment, pay for power, pay everything. You can actually have access to this. Use it for what you need, and then you're done with it. So this gets really interesting when you think about the capabilities that you might need for some massive scale, but you don't need it all the time. You need it for a specific workload. This is where we can shine with some of the scale out aspects about it. So here's another really interesting update that just came through. Is we are actually providing enterprise support for PyTorch now. So if you're familiar with PyTorch and its machine learning and AI capabilities, came from Facebook. It's an open source, but there is now commercial support for it. This means that you can call Microsoft Premier and say, hey, I'm trying to do this thing with PyTorch and it's not working. Help me. And they can actually get in and support you with that. If you think about that from an overall value perspective, trying to be able to take advantage of some of these more kind of, I don't want to call them revolutionary, even new, because they've been around for a long time, but some of these newer code bases and libraries, and actually have enterprise level support on your AI and ML initiatives that are baked into using some of these capabilities, that's a pretty big deal. Again, and it's more of a way to highlight just how serious Microsoft is in the research space and the focus that we're taking on things like this. So I already talked a little bit about Synapse Analytics and what an amazing tool that is. Well, we just made it better by adding GPU acceleration for the Spark clusters in Synapse Analytics. So again, if you're wanting to use some of these really kind of heavy duty GPUs to do your inferencing or anything to that nature, you now have ability to take advantage of that right inside Synapse using the Spark clusters. Again, I'm not trying to wow you with a whole bunch of oh wow, nobody's done that before. Well, maybe the NVIDIA A100s where we're faster than any other public cloud. Yeah, that one wows you. Nobody's done that. But this one, it's more of kind of making sure you understand the direction and the investments that we're providing into this space, so that it comes back and benefits the broader community. So that's kind of the investments we've made from a technology platform perspective. And now I've been around higher ed for a long time. I've been at 2.5 years with Microsoft. The entire time has been in education. and I get beat up about a lot of different things. And one of those things is we didn't have a real solid relationship with NIH when it came to using the strides concept. So this one just came out. We just spoke about it very recently on an Azure for Research office hours, which I will also get into a little bit more. But as of end of July, we now have that deep integration and partnership with NIH for strides. Now you can go to the NIH release if you want. You can go to the Microsoft blog. If you're interested in expanding this and taking advantage of it, feel free to reach out to your account team. If you really want to, you can email me if you want to, and I'll get involved with you. But this was a big deal for us from a perspective of saying, hey, we are dedicated to research. We're focused in with NIH, and we wanted to partner with them and get it all sorted, and we finally got that done. So again, another big announcement from an overall perspective of working with the biggest areas of research that I felt like we were missing some pieces on. So to me, this was a pretty big announcement. So when we start talking about NIH, specifically government grants, all of that stuff, or HIPAA regulatory compliance, other aspects, again, it's another eye chart. We have more compliance certifications than any other cloud provider. Okay, I'm not making that up. You can go fact check me on that one. Plain and simple, we've got more compliance certifications than any other cloud provider, period. Now, some of these that might be interesting to you are things like obviously HIPAA, obviously things around NIST 853 or 171. And yeah, even when you need to get into something a little deeper around the lines of like CMMC level 3, that is stuff that we can work with. Now, there are going to be some specifics around CMMC level 3. That is going to be GovCloud. That has to do with the specific phrasing in the requirements around impact level 4 that we have to be able to provide, some specifics on that one. So that means you're in sovereign cloud. Period. End of story. But we can still help you through that. And on the discussion of CMMC level 3, we're taking it very serious. In fact, this is a screenshot of what we call our product placemat, where we talk about all the different things that we do specifically around CMMC level 3. And with that, I actually want to jump into a demo, but before I do, I see there's 9 chats in there. Just kind of curious if there's any.
No, I'm watching for you. I asked a couple of questions. People there, if you go back that one slide, and we'll make these slides available for people. That list of all the things that we're compliant under was commented on, which was great. So we're
awesome.
Good.
Fantastic. So I am pulling over a screen now. Hopefully, is that showing up my the Azure portal?
Yep.
Fantastic.
Yep.
All right. So I talked a lot about kind of security, compliance, all these other pieces, and I prefaced at the beginning, hey, comprehensive set of security tools, right? And you're like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. What do you mean, right? How do I help you? How does Azure help you be a little bit more secure, especially when you're talking about regulatory compliance? There's a couple things I wanted to show you around specifically CMMC level 3, around HIPAA, around all these different pieces. And kind of the cornerstone for a lot of this stuff is in our Azure Security Center and Policy and Sentinel, okay? So I'm going to walk through these a little bit, especially from when it comes from the secure research side or the trusted research environments, any of this kind of stuff. And again, I spent a lot of time focusing on this. The first thing we're going to talk to is Security Center. In Security Center, I have a lot of different things in here that you can look at. You can get an overall secure score. I can get you an idea of where I'm missing things or where I'm grabbing things well. And I want you to just see a couple things here. I am not going to pretend that you are all going to only use Azure and that's it, period. I would love it, don't get me wrong, right? But I absolutely recognize that in higher ed, the likelihood that you're going to be all in on a single cloud provider all the time is it's just not realistic. Okay. So why I want to talk about that is Security Center can monitor stuff on-prem, can monitor stuff in AWS, it can monitor stuff in GCP. So when you start thinking about regulatory compliance, you could actually start monitoring your security posture in Security Center across your clouds. Okay. This is, again, it's one of those things that we just do it better, in my opinion. We do it really well. It's baked into a lot of aspects, and you can get that kind of coverage for on-prem, AWS, GCP, and of course, Azure, right? So this is kind of your overview screen. I can look at my firewalls. I can look at a bunch of different things. And then we have Azure Defender. So Azure Defender is a deeper level of integration. And that is something that you can really get Qualys scanning built into it. You can get a lot of different other pieces that are really kind of deep in the security perspective as far as managing your posture, okay? And you know, there's obviously a lot of tabs. I'm not gonna go into every single one of these because it's not an Azure Security Center demo. This is an Azure kind of overview. If you ever wanna have a conversation about Security Center deep, if you wanna go into Sentinel and have a deep conversation, policy, any of that, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to share it with you. This is again where I spend a lot of my focus.
Hey, Clayton.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting question that I think in the chat that maybe we could address. It asks, are Azure Commercial and Azure Government physically different clouds? And then which one are you talking about when you talk about security? And I know there's some subtlety, so you might want to spend a second.
Yeah, so the best way to think about it is, yeah, essentially when you say Gov Cloud versus Commercial Cloud, yes, they are separate clouds. They have separate data centers. They have a lot of separation. Really, what it boils down to when you get to Gov Cloud, and I'll speak a little bit about this IL4 that kind of makes CMMC level 3, you know, kind of force you to Gov Cloud, is it's also staffed differently. So IL4 basically says only US citizens can work on the environment. So in Commercial Cloud, we have nationals from just a myriad of countries that work for Microsoft, right? We're a very diverse company, have a lot of people who come from around the world and come to work for Microsoft, and they work in our data centers. Specifically in the Gov Cloud data center, you have to have clearance, and you have to be an American citizen to be able to get in there. That is how we can attest that we're meeting the IL4 standards. So yeah, they are physically different. And so when I'm talking about security though, Azure Security Center, all of this is available in Commercial Cloud and Gov Cloud. And so it depends on, you know, what exactly you're trying to do and which component you're specifically looking for. So if you're trying to get CMMC level 3, or if you've got some DFARS or other DoD type workloads, you're probably gonna end up in Gov Cloud. But if you're talking about, you know, HIPAA regulated stuff, or even you could pull away 800.171 CUI, which is going to flow into CMMC level 3 quite soon. But 853, you know, FedRAMP high, those type of things you can actually do in Commercial Cloud. So, and a lot of those same security toolings go across both ones.
Hey, Clayton, just to add to that, you sort of dropped that in there, but I think it's important that the Microsoft Commercial Cloud is a FedRAMP high environment. And so you really only have to go to the Azure Gov if you're really have very, very strict requirements around it. And we can help you figure out that it works. So, okay. Hope we got it. Thanks. That's helpful.
Yeah, in fact, most of the 800.171, 853 workloads that I've done over the last couple of years have all been in Commercial Cloud. Just CMMC level 3. Alan's got that fun little phrase in there that Microsoft can attest to it, so it tips us over. But yeah, good call out, Rick. So, anyways, I want to kind of move on a little bit, and since and it's right around regulatory compliance, right? So I can actually look at different regulatory requirements and have my environments evaluated against those requirements. So if I'm looking at, HIPAA, what you're going to see is the HIPAA control set, or the NIST 853 control set, or the NIST 800-171 control set. And you'll see that it's the 3.1 family of access control. And then I can drill into it, and it's literally going to give me the control. So we map the policy all the way down to a technical control, or what we would call an Azure policy that evaluates if you're meeting the compliance perspective. Okay, so that's how these work. Now you're saying, hey, how come some of these are grayed out? Well, that's because we don't do stuff on these. These are, we're not going to train your employees. We're not going to, provide security awareness training to your employees. So these are things that you're responsible for as an institution. We handle the technical piece, right? If you think about the shared security model, we handle a whole bunch, you have to handle a whole bunch, and some of them we meet in the middle, and there's some overlap. But when it comes to regulatory compliance, what you'll often see is that if it's grayed out, it's because we don't manage any aspect of that. That's all on you. But that's where you can come in and get an idea of how secure you are. So access to storage accounts with firewall and virtual network configuration should be restricted. Looks like I'm not doing so great on that one. I'm failing 62 out of 63. I got one that's right. All these different things. It gives you a quick idea of your regulatory compliance. And when I talk about compliance policies, I kind of want to jump into policies themselves, so you understand that what a policy is. So within policies, again, I can come in and get a quick idea of how compliant I am. You'll see that I have these initiatives, as they're called. So I'm going to come down here to definitions, and I'm going to explain what these are. Now, this is important for you to understand when I talk about a comprehensive set of controls, comprehensive set of tooling from what we have. We have the policy piece that can report up through Azure Security Center. It can actually report out other ways, but it also gives you an idea of how secure you are. So if we look at a policy definition versus an initiative definition, an initiative is a collection of policies. A policy is a single policy. So if you look at some of these things that are, have 13, 16, all these different policies, it looks like somebody's gone a little crazy creating some policies here. I think somebody's trying to do something fun. So FedRAMP High, there's 262 policies affiliated with that initiative. So you can see we're in preview for CMMC level 3, 182 policies configured with that policy set, right? NIST 853, Rev 4, 991. These are pre-canned that we manage for you. So we're doing the work of mapping the asks from the compliance piece and mapping them into what it translates to in Azure from a technical control. Okay, when you talk about doing a lot of the heavy lifting, you can see that we've done a ton of the heavy lifting for you, right? So let's pop into one of these just for kicks and giggles. Let's go ahead and look at CMMC level 3. I'm going to open that up, and you're going to see there's a collection of policies. This is the joy of sharing an internet connection, working from home with two software engineers and a cloud architect, all in the same house at the same time. So stuff moves slow from time to time. All right, so this is an individual policy. It's going to audit Windows machines. It's going to say it should be connected to a specific workspace, and then the effect type, right? Audit if it's not there. Now these ones, I can actually put in some parameters and I can change some stuff. This one will actually modify it. So I need a system assigned managed identity to make sure that I've got the guest config agents installed and running. If it's not in there, I want you to do it for me. And so that's going to modify permissions. And then it's going to actually deploy the guest config agent for me. So these are things that I utilize to maintain my security posture from a programmatic perspective. So within these policy sets, you're going to see there's a lot of these different audit if not exists, and these parameterizations that I can use to throw some pieces in to make sure that everything's working. But, again, Linux guest config. So if I try and turn on a Linux VM and I haven't enabled the extension as part of the deployment, it's going to go ahead and do it for me. And if I have somebody tries to turn on a data lake store and it's not encrypted, it'll block them. So it won't allow it to happen. So these are the policies. And again, all of these, that are audit if not exists or audit, these will show up in Security Center. These will show up in a few different places. You can even create alerts around them. So from a security perspective, being able to know what your overall security posture is at any given time is huge as far as helping you pass an audit and get your certifications for it. So especially with CMMC level 3. CMMC level 3 is different than CUI, even though it's going to encompass CUI. CUI allowed you to drift in the safe harbor of self-attestation. The C, the last C in CMMC is certification. You will have to have an audit and you'll have to have somebody else attest to it. So this is where some of the stuff that you can kind of go through and get some attestation and some other aspects. And then the parameters as well, what you can include in there to make things happen. So I'm going to go to a different policy that's a little bit less onerous. And we'll look at the high trust HIPAA policy. Rob, I see you've got a question as this was loading. I was looking at the chat. So transfer an environment from one type of VM to another.
Yeah, this came up in an earlier session today that Ashish did. Somebody asked the question: if I've got something running in a VM, I believe the particular question was they were running some GPU code. Excuse me. Can I pick that up and move it to a bigger GPU? Just pick it up and move it, or do I have to do a bunch of work to make it happen?
Yeah, so because I'm a cloud solution architect, I'm obligated to answer with it depends. It's a running joke, but in reality, it really does depend on where your workload's running, right? So, like if you're in Synapse, you can choose your compute based on what you're doing. So you can be sitting there running in a small GPU cluster, Spark cluster, and it's not big enough. I go spin up another one, and now I just point it to that compute and use that one instead. If you're running an actual VM and your workload's on the VM, then yeah, you're gonna have to stop it, scale up and do a few different things and kind of change from there. The other options you've got is if you're running it in a container and it can be broken out, you can always scale out nodes on using Kubernetes or whatever you want. So there's a lot of different ways to do it, and a lot of flexibility on that one. My personal favorite, right, is I'm a Python guy. I like notebooks, and I like running my notebooks in Azure Machine Learning or Synapse. And so the beauty of that is I can always just choose a different compute target. I can just go, no, that's not big enough. I need that for the next 30 minutes. So I'm going to spin up this massive cluster. I'm going to go resize and make a new VM, underlying VM, and that's what I'm going to hit. And I'm going to use that as my target compute while I run my my notebook. And then as soon as it's done, I'm going to disable it, and I'm not going to pay for it anymore. So yeah, a lot of it depends on the style of research and exactly what people are doing, but a lot of different ways to work through that one. Now, sometimes somebody's got such a highly coupled architecture that literally nothing's going to work if you try and tweak with the underlying VM. And at that point, you're probably going to redeploy. You could do a few different things. You could use Azure Site Recovery. You could and migrate it to a different underlying resource or something of that nature. But like I said, it kind of depends on what you're working in. That's why for me, like, I think there's two camps, and I joke about it. There's sometimes I'm in both camps, and it's camp one is death to the VM, no more VMs, and then the other camp is long live the VM, and it really does change depending on specific workloads. I'm working with a customer right now who's taking advantage of some open source stuff that has to be installed on a full VM. So I don't really have a choice. So long live the VM. We're spinning up a VM. We're testing it. We're running in it's Microsoft's open source InterEye. We're testing it, seeing how burly it is. If it's tipping it over, then we'll go ahead and we'll run and push it to a bigger VM if we need to. So hopefully that answers your question, Rob. So I'm going to go over to parameters again. So all of these different parameters need to be filled out when you assign it. So if I was going to assign it, I can assign it to a subscription. I can assign it to a management group, and this is scope. This is something I want to talk to you about real quickly. One of the things that we have that's fantastic in Azure is the notion of management groups, which means I can have subscriptions pulled into a management group. I can have role-based access control at a management group layer, and I can have things inherent. I can nest management groups up to 6 deep. Don't do it 6 deep. If you do it 6 deep, I'll find you, I'll slap your hands. But around 4 is about as deep as you'd want to go. But if you think about everything's inheriting, so let's say a top management group for the entire research org that's going to have some basic concepts about it, make sure that some basic security is there. And then we've got one that's, hey, this is our HIPAA research management group, and everything that goes into that management group is going to pick up the HIPAA compliance initiative. And I can assign that to the management group, and every time I pull a subscription under it, it's just going to pick up that policy set. So I don't actually have to continually apply a policy set and assign it and parameterize it and run through the remediation pieces for everything I do. I can have that all sitting there and then just move the subscriptions into it. So when I get to remediations, I create a managed identity. I can create remediation tasks that'll go through and do a lot of these things for me. All right, so now the last thing I'm going to do is jump out of this, and I'm going to go into one other aspect around compliance and security, and this is Azure Sentinel. So Azure Sentinel is a cloud native SIEM tool. So if you're familiar with Logarithm, Splunk, any of that kind of stuff, that's very much the same vein as this, right? So Azure Sentinel is where a security center manages your security posture, and it kind of tells you, hey, how are you doing from a patch perspective, from a policy perspective? This is like, hey, what's going on in my environment, right? I had a researcher log in from LA, and 15 minutes later, he logged in from mainland China. Is that normal? Is that impossible travel? Was he connected to a VPN? This gives you the ability to investigate that. And when you think about compliance, we can get into the workbooks, and this is where you can get really deep into really understanding what's going on in your network and in your Azure environment, as well as your other environments, right? So let's go ahead and look for our CMMC. Well, let's just search it because I can't find it anymore. There we go. They've changed it as far as name. All right. So let's look at this notebook. And again, I'm just kind of showing off some things here to give you an idea of what the capabilities are. So we're going to go ahead and turn the guide on. And we're going to keep the maturity level 3. And I want to know specifically around access control. So it's going to give me an idea of the family overview. It's going to give me the control requirements that come from the government on this one. Some of the shared pieces, and then I can come down and actually start getting real-time info on these pieces. So I can start understanding what's going on within my environment and make sure that I'm meeting those levels of requirements that we would expect. So this is a pre-canned workbook. This is something you can just take advantage of by turning Sentinel on in your environment and pushing things through, okay? So again, just kind of a quick go through so you understand what it is that we have available to you in Azure, right? So we will jump back to the slide deck here real quick, and I'm going to talk about and then I see you've got a new new question in there, and I'll come right back to it as soon as we're almost towards the end of the deck, and then we can just have more of a straight up conversation. So
yeah, then that works for that question. It wasn't.
yeah.
Okay.
So, okay, I've got you so excited about Azure. Now you're ready to jump in with both feet. Where do you start, right? So we've got Azure fundamentals. We have a lot of virtual training days. They'll throw out the different Azure fundamental courses. There's data fundamentals. There's analytics fundamentals. There's all sorts of stuff. And that's one place to go. You can actually just get in and start creating some machine learning models. There's a lot of different things that you can go in and look and start playing with. And then there's some training and some aspects around really kind of managing your costs. And there is some actually really cool training on introduction to high performance compute on Azure. And then as well, working through your managed identities and that kind of stuff. So what do those look like? Well, we've got, and I'll send these links out as part of the slide deck. I'll make sure all the links are included. You know, we've got all these specific training pieces on aka.ms learn, where you can get started with Azure, an overview of how Azure works, storage services, HPC, overviews of machine learning, right? These are all just on MS Learn. And same with the fundamentals and all these different pieces, you could just get in there. And we've actually even added a couple learning paths specifically geared towards researcher. So that's, you know, an introduction to cloud computing for researchers, kind of talking about how you do research projects in Azure specifically. And then there's one that's all around cloud security and cost management. I can't, you know, these are things that keep researchers up at night, I've found, or at least the folks that support them. Just being able to make sure that the security is there and the cost management is there. Again, these are the type of things that for lack of a better phrase, keep people up at night. Another huge piece of support, and if this feels a little bit like a commercial, it's probably because it is. I host with one of my peers, John Brown. Every week we have Azure for Research office hours. This is where we want to bring researchers in, people who support researchers, so the IT folks that support researchers and research computing. It's a weekly call. We vacillate between having a customer story, having open Q&A, having, you know, tomorrow I'm presenting on FHIR with John Brown, so FHIR, FHIR. Yeah, I will. In fact, yeah, Rick or I can probably post that one right in the chat window, but it's also right down here. If you go to the vanity URL that's at the bottom right of the page, aka.ms/edu/Azure Hour, that will take you to a website that will have you sign up for the entire team. And then you'll see that the different subgroups for the office hours are in there, and you can just download the calendar invite and come join us. So again, it's a great way for you to come join us and spend some time talking to your peers. I say this every week. This is a Microsoft facilitated call. I have no intention to own it and be an overlord. This is meant for the research community and the research computing community. We really want to hear from you. We want to make sure that the topics are what's relevant to you. We've had folks literally come in and just ask us questions and say, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. It's broken. It's not working. Okay, well, let's get in. And right then we're actually solving problems for folks, and people on the call are taking advantage of that knowledge at the same time. So again, really, really positive aspect there that we've enjoyed. I've personally got a lot of benefit and enjoyed doing it. So to give you an idea of what upcoming sessions are, what our sessions are, just last week we had the NIH Strides Initiative conversation. So we had Marco from Microsoft. Again, I'm presenting tomorrow, and then next week it's just open Q&A, and then it's John Wright, who's a customer from Jackson Labs, actually showing what he did specifically with FHIR and interoperability with his clinical systems. Then we're back to a Q&A, and then John, myself, Paul, you, Steve Pontello, probably names that a few of you know. We're going to show an architecture that is a trusted research environment that has no VMs, right? So death to the VMs on this one. I'll probably have one in 2 weeks after that. Long live the VM. It's going to be InterEye, and we'll talk about how that deploys. And so these are kind of the things that we cover from a topic perspective. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and we'll be done with the presentation, and we'll jump right into some of these questions. So.
Yeah, so if we go back, actually, if we go, there's 2 questions that really come up. Let's take the second one first. I think the one from Jacob was asking about why does Azure restrict Kubernetes upgrades to a level at a time? And
So
how
that
do you
would be,
keep up with it?
Yeah, so that is a challenge. I can honestly say I haven't had that close of a conversation with the product team to try and figure out their mindset behind it. I also don't know if that's going to change anytime soon. It's one of those things where we love this kind of feedback because it's something we can take back to the product team and say, hey, why don't you do this? A lot of times we get these comments from customers. We go back to the product team and like, oh, hey, we know everybody tells us the same thing, and it's in the works, and here's the roadmap. So that's one of those things that we'd chase down for. In fact, it's funny, not again to go back to the commercial of come join the research office hours, but we get things like that through the office hours. We take them back to the product team and we ask the questions, and then we bring it back and say, okay, we got an answer for you. So that's a lot of stuff we do. So I'm looking at your comment, Rob. Don't environment with a great reputation. Oh yeah, so using VS Code as your dev tool, but staying right in there, right? I'd love that. In fact, that's one of the things you can do with VS Code is I will use VS Code to author my notebook, and then I'll actually just target my AML compute resources, and I will run it right from VS Code. I won't go into the portal. In fact, if y'all join the secure research without a VM, you're actually going to see that in action. But I'm even going to do it with an extra layer of obfuscation. So we're going to stream VS Code as an application from Windows Virtual Desktop. And that Windows Virtual Desktop is basically a privileged access workstation getting into the AML compute resources on a private endpoint. And it's completely locked down, but nobody's getting into the Azure portal. The researchers are just using VS Code to run all their analytics and doing it all in there. So great point out there. So
there was a Tim dropped a comment in there just about back to the Kubernetes things, that it might actually be tied to Kubernetes and not something that we're doing. There's a couple of Kubernetes questions in there.
Yep,
there's a question about the NIH agreement. I can take a stab on that. The
Sure.
NIH agreement does include, there is, I forget the level of support, but effectively what the STRIDES agreement is it's a full contract for how we do business with people who have NIH grants. And I say it like that. So it includes, not only does it include support and discounts on the instances and discounts on the Azure portion of it. It includes training and it includes access to other people as well. So it's all bundled in there. And in terms of the support, that's included in the cost of the Azure instances.
Yeah, and I think one other thing to add on top of that, so if you're a Premier customer, your Premier support will work for Azure type stuff. I know as a CSA, we help a lot of people stand things up and get them going. And realistically, if you come to me and you're in my region where I work and you have an NIH agreement, great. Doesn't matter to me. You're my customer. I'm helping you no matter what. Right. So that's part of the flexibility we've been giving as CSA. We've been given as CSAs is to kind of ignore, the is it NIH or is it from their regular enterprise enrollment? For us, it doesn't really matter. So it gives us the ability to keep working with you and support you. Any additional questions?
All right.
I covered an awful lot, and I threw a bunch at you. And again, hopefully this hit the mark for you. I didn't want to come across as kind of trying to sell you on any particular service or anything to that nature. What I wanted to do was just show you the attitude that Microsoft has towards research, the attitude, the investments, and how we're working. And I know, obviously I know Rob pretty well. I've been able to help him with some fun stuff around machine learning and other aspects. So hopefully that came across that we're just here to help you out personally. Research is a big deal for me. My sister's an MD PhD. I always say my biggest brag point is when she had to hire me to help. Like that was pretty cool, because before that she was the cool sister, like she was the sibling that everybody talked about, and she had to hire me, so it was cool. But no, I do love research and happy to support research and all the research computing folks. So feel free to reach out to me, especially UW folks. I'm chomping at the bit for travel to open back up, so I can come up to my second favorite place, which is Seattle. So.
Oh, thank you, Clayton, and thank you for covering such a wide variety of information. I think that you really did establish the sort of helpful tone that Azure has when researchers engage with it, at least in my experience. So yeah, that concludes the last talk of the day today. We are glad that you all attended. Thank you for coming to the first day of our conference. We'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. with more case studies, vendor presentations, and time to get to know your fellow attendees. So we'll see you tomorrow morning. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Naomi. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.